The shooting range was loud and busy. The sound of gunfire echoed every few seconds. People were laughing, talking, loading their weapons. It felt like any other Saturday afternoon, but something unusual was about to happen. In the far corner, away from the crowd, stood a quiet black woman. She was tall but slim, wearing a plain hoodie and old jeans. In her hand, she carried a long, worn-out black case. Her steps were calm, her face unreadable. She didn't speak to anyone. She just stood there waiting. Two young men near the benches noticed her. One nudged the other and smirked. "Look at her," he whispered. "She probably doesn't even know how to hold a gun." The other laughed quietly. "She's probably here for a selfie. Look at that old case, what's in there? A toy rifle." The woman didn't react. She heard them, but she didn't turn. Instead, she looked at the long row of targets in the distance. Her eyes, dark and sharp, followed each one carefully. It was as if she was studying the range, not the people. Something about her was strange. She looked shy, almost out of place. But her body language wasn't nervous. She didn't fidget. Her breathing was steady. And when her eyes narrowed for just a second, it felt like she wasn't seeing the range. She was calculating it. The two men laughed louder now. One pulled out his phone and whispered, "I'm recording this. It's going to be funny when she misses every shot." A few other people noticed her too and began murmuring. She was the only person not talking, not laughing, not practicing, just standing, watching. Finally, the range instructor walked over. He was a big man with a booming voice, used to teaching beginners. He glanced at her and smiled politely. "First time here?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she slowly set the case on the table. The metal latches clicked open. Inside, resting on black cloth, was a sleek black sniper rifle. The instructor's smile faded. That wasn't a beginner's weapon. The whispers grew louder. "Who brings that to a public range?" One man said, "She doesn't even look like she knows what she's doing," another added. But still, she said nothing. She just pulled out the rifle, wiped the barrel gently, began assembling it piece by piece with steady hands. The instructor watched carefully. Her movements were slow, precise, almost ritual-like. Not rushed, not clumsy. Every click and twist was perfect, as if she'd done it 1,000 times. He tilted his head slightly. "Ma'am, have you been trained before?" he asked. She didn't respond. She only tightened the scope, adjusted it, and finally looked up at him. Her voice was soft, calm. "I'll take lane 7, she said. Lane 7 was the farthest lane, with the longest targets. Even skilled shooters struggled there. The instructor hesitated but nodded. As she walked past, the two men who mocked her earlier snickered. One whispered loudly, "Lane 7. She won't even hit the first target." The other laughed. "This is going to be fun." She reached the lane and placed the rifle on the stand. The crowd had started to pay attention now. Something about her silence, her calmness, made people curious. She didn't seem scared. She didn't even seem focused in the way others were. She just was Dot. As she loaded her first round, the instructor called out, "Target set at 200 meters. The first distance easy for most experienced shooters." Everyone waited for her to aim, but she didn't aim. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a black cloth, a long, thick blindfold. And without saying a word, she tied it tightly over her eyes. The entire range went silent. Even the constant gunfire from other lanes stopped as people turned. To look, the two men burst into laughter. "Is she serious?" Shouted. "She's actually blindfolding herself." The other added, laughing so hard he could barely stand. Someone else muttered, "What is she doing? Is this some kind of joke?" The instructor took a step forward. "Ma'am, this isn't safe." "You can't," but before he could finish, the woman lifted her rifle. Her posture was perfect, her breathing slow. Her hands didn't tremble even slightly. She tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something. The wind, the sound of the flags, the echo of distant noises? Nobody knew. She whispered softly to herself, and then she fired. The shot echoed through the range. Everyone turned their eyes to the far target. It was a long white circle with a red bullseye. Paper fluttered for a moment. Then a hole appeared, dead center. Perfect bullseye. The laughter stopped instantly. No one spoke. The two men stared, their mouths open. The instructor slowly turned his head, blinking in disbelief. "Did she just—" he whispered. The other shooters froze, gripping their rifles tightly. Some took out their phones and started recording. The woman didn't lower her rifle. "I didn't even look at the target." She just whispered again, softly, "Next." The instructor swallowed hard. "Set target at 300 meters, he called, his voice shaking slightly. A new target was placed even farther. Again, she didn't aim with her eyes. The blindfold stayed. She adjusted her stance, breathed out slowly, and fired. Another echo, another perfect shot. Dead center now, the entire crowd was silent. No more laughter, no more whispers, only wide eyes and stunned faces. The instructor looked at her, his hands trembling. This wasn't luck. No one could do this. Not blindfolded. Not twice in a row. The two men who mocked her earlier began backing away. One muttered under his breath, "Who is she?" The other shook his head, speechless. But the woman didn't turn to them. She didn't speak. She only stood there, calm and still, as if this was nothing unusual, as if this was normal for her. The instructor finally stepped forward. "Ma'am, forgive me, but who exactly are you?" The woman tilted her head slightly. Then, for the first time, a small smile appeared on her lips. Her voice was soft, almost like a whisper. "I'm no one," she said. "Just here to practice." She loaded another round. The targets were moved farther still. Everyone in the room now held their breath. No one dared to speak. They all wanted to see just how far she could go, and in that silent room with every eye on her. The quiet woman raised her rifle again, still blindfolded, still calm, prepared to shock them all again. The shooting range was no longer filled with noise. The sound of bullets, chatter, and laughter had all faded. Every person in the room now had their eyes locked on her. The quiet black woman, who moments ago looked like a beginner, was now doing something none of them had ever seen. She stood at lane 7, blindfolded, her rifle steady. The first two targets hit dead center, still fluttered in the distance. Her hands didn't shake. Her breathing was slow, measured. She didn't even seem tired. One of the men who had mocked her earlier whispered nervously, She can't keep this up. It's just luck. Nobody shoots like this blindfolded." But his voice didn't sound confident anymore. He was trying. To convince himself, the other man shook his head. "Luck to perfect shots. You ever seen luck like that?" I think she's military." The instructor stood frozen. He had trained dozens of marksmen in his career. He had seen competitive shooters, veterans, even snipers. But this was different. Her movements weren't just skilled. They were perfect. Every shift of her feet, every breath, every squeeze of the trigger, it was like watching a machine. He finally spoke. "Set target at 400 meters. His voice echoed louder than before, as if trying to mask his unease. The staff moved quickly, placing a new target far in the distance. It was so far, it was hard to see the red bullseye with the naked eye. The crowd murmured, "No way she can hit that. Not blindfolded." Some shook their heads. Others raised their phones to record. Everyone wanted proof of what might happen next. She didn't wait for the crowd to settle. She tilted her head slightly, as if listening to the faintest sounds around her. The wind brushed across the range, carrying soft whispers through the air. Her lips moved, silently counting. Then she exhaled. One shot, one loud crack. The distant target wobbled violently. When the staff brought it closer for inspection, the crowd gasped. Dead center. Again, the two men who mocked her earlier now stood back, pale. One muttered, This isn't real." The other finally asked the question everyone was thinking, "Who is she?" She simply reached for another round, sliding it into the chamber with a quiet click. The blindfold stayed on. Her calmness never broke. It was as if she wasn't even trying. The instructor swallowed hard. He approached carefully. "Ma'am," he said softly, "forgive me for asking, but what are you doing here? Not here to practice, are you?" She didn't look at him. She simply adjusted the rifle and whispered, "Set the next target." Her voice was soft but carried an edge, the kind of tone that made people listen without question. The staff hesitated. There was only one more challenge left, a moving target, something even skilled shooters often missed at this range. The instructor looked around. People were whispering, "She won't do it. Nobody can hit a moving target blindfolded." But the woman didn't wait for the chatter to end. 500 meters, she said calmly. Her voice cut through the whispers. The instructor's jaw tightened. He nodded to the staff. The moving target, a small, fast-moving circle, was released on the rail. The crowd held their breath. Even the men who mocked her earlier stopped talking. Every eye followed the moving target as it zipped across the track. She raised her rifle. Slowly, the barrel following an invisible line. Her head tilted slightly, her ear catching the sound of the target's wheels sliding along the rail. Her body stilled. The range fell silent. You could hear the faint hum of the moving target. You could hear her inhale. And then she fired. The shot cracked through the air. The target, still moving at full speed, jerked violently. The staff ran down the track, lifted it, and froze. The crowd erupted in gasps. A perfect hole. Dead center. The moving target had been destroyed, blindfolded. The room filled with whispers. That's impossible. She has to be ex-military. No. No one in the military shoots that well. Who is she? What is she? The instructor finally stepped forward again, his voice shaking slightly. "Ma'am, you need to tell." "Me, who trained you? What's your background?" She finally lowered the rifle. The blindfold stayed on, but her head turned toward him. Her lips curled into the faintest smile. "Names don't matter," she said quietly. "Only skills do."
Oh.
The two men who mocked her earlier stepped forward cautiously. One stammered, "We.
Ow.
We didn't know. We're sorry for laughing. We." Didn't mean she cut him off with a raised hand. "No need to speak," she whispered. "Respect is earned, not begged for." She packed her rifle back into its case, locking it shut. The crowd watched in silence, unsure if they should speak, clap, or stay quiet. Her calmness made it clear she didn't want applause. She just wanted to leave. But before she could walk out, the instructor called out one last time. "Wait. You didn't miss a single shot today. No one here has ever done what you just did. At least tell us, why are you here? What are you training for?" The woman paused, her hand on the door, her head slightly turned. She didn't face them, but her words carried through the silent room. "I don't train for trophies. I train for moments. Moments when no one believes in you, and you remind them why they should." And with that, she walked out into the evening air, leaving a room full of stunned shooters behind her. Her legend had just begun to spread, but none of them would ever forget the day. The quiet black woman hit every target blindfolded. The shooting range was still silent long after she left. People whispered in small groups, replaying the moment on their phones, watching the perfect shots over and over. The two men who mocked her sat on the bench, pale and speechless. Even the instructor, a veteran of 20 years, stood frozen near lane 7, staring at the bullet holes. He had seen skilled shooters before, but not like her. Never like her. That night, her story spread online. Videos were posted everywhere. Woman destroys moving target blindfolded. Is she ex-military? Is this sniper? In just hours, hundreds of thousands of people had watched her calm, deadly precision, and by morning, the videos reached someone who knew exactly who she was. The next day, the range was quiet again, but there was a new group waiting. Men in suits stood near the entrance, talking in low voices. They weren't here to practice. They were waiting. Each one wore a small badge on their chest, government-issued. The instructor recognized it instantly. He tensed. "Special division," he muttered to himself. These weren't ordinary officers. These were recruiters. The kind who only showed up for extraordinary people when the quiet black woman returned. That afternoon, carrying the same worn case, she noticed them immediately. She didn't stop. She didn't ask why they were there. She simply walked past, as if they didn't exist, and headed straight for lane 7. The instructor walked up quickly. "Ma'am, those men, they're here for you," he whispered. She calmly set down her case. "I know," she replied softly. Her voice carried no fear, no surprise. It's almost as if she'd been expecting them. The suited men approached. The tallest of them, with sharp eyes and a stern face, stepped forward. "Shadow Eye," he said quietly. The name sent a ripple through the crowd of shooters who had gathered to watch. "That's what they call you, isn't it? The sniper who vanished 3 years ago. The one nobody could find." She didn't answer. She simply began assembling. Her rifle, piece by piece, her hands as steady as ever. The man continued, his tone firm. "You don't belong in a public range. Your skills are wasted here. We need you. For something bigger." The crowd whispered among themselves. "Shadow Eye. Is that her code name? I knew she had to be military. But why is she here then? Why is she so calm?" The woman ignored the whispers. She tightened the scope, loaded a round, and finally spoke. "I don't work for anyone anymore." Her voice was quiet, but her words carried a weight that silenced even the crowd. The man's jaw tightened. "This isn't optional," he said, sharply. "There's a reason we've been looking for you. Your old unit needs you. And you're the only one who can." Before he could finish, she pulled the black blindfold from her pocket. Without a word, she tied it tightly over her eyes, lifted her rifle, and fired. The shot rang out before anyone could react. The farthest target, nearly invisible to the naked eye, snapped in half. Lowered her rifle slowly, turned her head toward the man in the suit and said softly, "Do you see now? I don't need anyone, and I don't take orders." The man's jaw clenched, but his eyes flickered, not with anger, but with something closer to respect. He gestured for his team to step back. "This isn't over," he said, his tone low. "We'll talk again soon," and just like that, they left. No one dared to stop them. The crowd was silent. Their eyes locked on the quiet woman who had just defied a government division with nothing but a single shot. She packed her rifle once more and turned toward the exit. But this time, before she could leave, the 2 men who mocked her stepped forward again. Their voices trembled. "Please, tell us, who are you really? Why are you so good at this?" She paused for a moment, her hand resting on the case. Her head tilted slightly, as if deciding whether to answer. Finally, she spoke. "I learned the hard way," she said softly. "In the places where missing a shot meant death, hesitation, meant losing someone you loved." Her eyes darkened, just for a moment, as if remembering something painful. "Out there, you don't get second chances. So you learn to never miss." The range stayed silent as she walked toward the door. But this time, there was no laughter, no mockery, only respect and fear. Everyone knew they had seen something they'd never forget, and deep down, they all wondered the same thing. If she wasn't military anymore, what had she been doing all this time, and why? Did the government want her back so badly? Outside, the wind howled across the empty parking lot. She placed the case in the trunk of an old black car, closed it gently, and looked up at the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, faint rotor sounds echoed a helicopter, approaching fast. She sighed softly, almost as if she had been expecting. "It looks like they're not done with me yet," she whispered to herself. Then, with the same calm, unreadable expression, she stepped into the car, started the engine, and disappeared into the night. While the whispers of Shadow Eye began to spread far beyond the shooting range, the highway was empty and dark. The only sound was the soft hum of her old black car rolling down the road. The quiet black woman, known only as Shadow Eye to those who knew her, drove with steady hands. Her face was calm, her eyes fixed ahead, but she could hear it, the low, distant thump of rotor blades. It was getting louder. She didn't panic. She didn't even slow down. Instead, she pulled off the road and parked under a long stretch of trees where the shadows swallowed the car whole. She turned off the engine, stepped out, and closed the door without a sound. The night was still, except for the helicopter. It was circling now, up above. A black military chopper swept across the sky. its searchlight cutting through the darkness like a blade. It wasn't random. It was looking for her. She knew it. They hadn't given up after leaving the range. The Special Division didn't send helicopters unless it was serious. They wanted her back. Badly. She opened her trunk and pulled out the worn case. Her hands moved fast, assembling the rifle in seconds, as if every piece knew exactly where it belonged. She didn't even look up at the helicopter. Instead, she crouched low in the shadows, listening to the rhythm of the blades slicing through the air. Inside the chopper, the pilot's voice crackled over the radio. Target's car located. East Road. No visual on Target herself. Stern. Voice replied through his headset. Find her. She's on foot. Use thermal if you need to. Can't let her walk away again. The searchlight swept over the trees, bright and blinding. But just as it passed a thick cluster of branches, a sharp click echoed in the dark. Shadow Eye was prone now, rifle pressed to her shoulder, breathing in time with the rhythm of the blades. Her finger hovered just over the trigger. Not to kill. Not yet, just to warn. She fired. The bullet didn't hit the helicopter, it hit the searchlight. Perfect shot. The bulb shattered, plunging the chopper into darkness. Inside, alarms blared. The pilot jerked the controls. She's got eyes on us, he shouted. Pull back. But the stern voice came again. No retreat. We need her alive. Get a visual, land if you must. Shadow Eye stayed still, listening. She could hear the change in the engine's pitch. They were lowering altitude now, preparing to land. She knew what came next. A ground team, armed. Fast, she pulled the black blindfold from her pocket and tied it over her eyes. In the dark, with no light, it didn't make a difference. But for her, the blindfold wasn't about sight. It was about focus. When the world went black, she heard everything. The shift of boots in grass, the faint click of a rifle being loaded, the whisper of breath in the cold air. The helicopter touched down in a field nearby. 5 armed men jumped out, moving fast through the trees. They thought she was running. They thought she was scared. But she wasn't. She was waiting. The first man spotted her car and motioned silently. To the others, didn't even see her crouched, just meters away, rifle steady, blindfold on, listening to every move they made. The second he stepped into her line, she fired. Not a kill shot. The bullet struck the ground right in front of his foot, sending dirt flying. He froze, raising his hands. The others aimed their rifles instantly, but a soft voice echoed through the trees. Lower your weapons. You won't. Hit me, and I won't miss. The soldiers hesitated. They had heard the stories, of course. It's the woman who could hit a coin at a mile. It's the one who trained entire squads to shoot with both hands blindfolded. The one the Special Division lost and could never replace. Now, standing in the shadows, they realized the rumors were true. The leader of the squad, tall man with a scar along his jaw, stepped forward slowly. Shadow Eye, he said carefully. We don't want to fight. We just need you to come. With us, your old unit is compromised. They need you. She tilted her head, the blindfold hiding her eyes, but not the faint smirk on her lips. Need me? She repeated softly. Or can't control things without me? The scarred man stiffened but didn't answer. He knew the truth. She wasn't just another sniper. She was the sniper, the one they called when missions were impossible. And the last time she walked away, the entire division nearly collapsed. She stood slowly, slinging the rifle over her shoulder. Her movements were deliberate, calm, threatening, but every soldier there knew she could drop all of them before they could blink. She turned toward the sound of the helicopter's blades. I'll listen, she said softly. But only once. If I don't like what I hear, you'll wish you never found me. The scarred man nodded sharply. Understood. But this mission isn't just another job. It's personal. She didn't respond. She simply walked past them, blindfold still on, and stepped into the helicopter without hesitation. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, but followed. None of them spoke. No one dared to test her patience as the helicopter lifted into the cold night sky. The pilot glanced back nervously. She sat completely still, hands resting on the worn case at her feet. Her expression was unreadable, but her presence filled the cabin like a storm about to break. Finally, the scarred man sat across from her. His voice was low, serious. The target isn't an enemy soldier, it's one of yours. Her head tilted slightly. For the first time that night, her calm expression changed. Not fear, not anger, but something colder. Which one? She asked quietly. The man's eyes met hers, unblinking.
Oh.
Your old protege. The one you trained to never miss has gone rogue. The helicopter's blades sliced through the cold night air, the steady thumping echoing in the dark sky. Inside the cabin, the soldiers sat tense and silent. Only two people weren't looking down or fidgeting. The scarred man, their commander, and her. The quiet black woman the world called Shadow Eye, she sat still, hands resting on the worn case at her feet. Her blindfold was now around her neck, but her eyes were half closed, listening more than looking. The commander leaned forward, his voice low and firm. The mission isn't about hunting an enemy soldier, he said. It's about one of ours. Your protege, the one you trained personally. He paused, watching for her reaction. Her face didn't change. Not a twitch. Not a blink. 3 months ago, the commander continued. He went dark, stopped answering calls, abandoned the unit. Now he's selling intel to the highest bidder. We've tried tracking him. Every team failed. He leaned back slightly. He's using everything you taught him, and frankly, no one but you can stop him. For the first time, her fingers twitched against the rifle case. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. Name. The commander didn't hesitate. Ethan Cole, your best student. The one who broke your old record at 1,000 meters. Jaw tightened slightly. Flicker of memory crossed her face. A younger man, confident, laughing as he hit target after target. She remembered the day she told him, if you ever go rogue, there's only one person who can stop you. And it's not the division, it's me. The commander studied her carefully. We don't care how you do it. We just need him stopped. Alive, if possible, but dead if necessary. His tone was hard, but there was something in his eyes. Relief. Relief that she hadn't walked away yet. She finally opened her eyes fully and looked at him. No, I'm coming, she said softly. He'll expect me, and he'll be ready. Her voice was calm, but there was something colder beneath it. This won't be a hunt. It will be a duel. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone on board had heard the stories about how Shadow Eye trained her protégés, teaching them to shoot blindfolded, to track by sound, to hit targets while holding their breath underwater. If her protege had turned against them, he wouldn't just be dangerous, would be nearly untouchable. The helicopter banked hard, heading toward a distant coastline. The commander's voice broke the silence again. He's on the cliffs outside Ravenport. Abandoned lighthouse. Where he's selling the intel tonight. He glanced at her. You'll be dropped 2 kilometers out. We'll stay back. If we get too close, he'll vanish. She nodded once, wordless. The blindfold, still draped around her neck, fluttered slightly as the wind from the open cabin door rushed in. The soldiers checked their weapons nervously. But she didn't move. She just listened. To the blades. To the wind. To the faint hum of the ocean far below. Finally, the commander leaned closer, his voice low. You trained him. You know his habits. Know his weaknesses. Can you stop him? Her lips curved into the faintest smile, a smile without warmth. Every student forgets one thing their teacher told them. She reached for a blindfold, tying it loosely in her hand. And that's always their mistake. The soldiers didn't dare ask what she meant. They just watched as she stood, slung the rifle over her shoulder, and waited by the cabin door as the helicopter descended. The lights of the abandoned lighthouse came into view, a tall, crumbling tower on the edge of a black cliff, waves crashing. Far below, a perfect place for an ambush. Perfect place for someone like Ethan Cole to wait. The helicopter hovered low, its searchlights off. She didn't need them. The night, the shadows, the sound of the waves, all of it was enough for her. Without a word, she stepped out, landing softly on the damp grass, the cold sea wind whipping around her. The helicopter rose quietly, fading into the distance. She was alone now. The lighthouse loomed ahead, its broken windows glowing faintly from dim lights inside. Somewhere in there, Ethan Cole was waiting. And if he had learned anything from her, you already knew she was here. Crouched low, removing the blindfold from her neck. With one smooth motion, she tied it over her eyes. To anyone else, it would make her weaker. To her, it made her unstoppable. Inside the lighthouse, Ethan Cole sat by a cracked window, watching the cliffside through a thermal scope. He was young, lean and confident, his movements sharp and efficient. A duffel bag filled with classified drives sat at his feet. When he saw the faint heat signature moving through the grass, he smirked. "So, she came," he muttered. His voice was calm, almost amused. He set the scope down and checked his rifle. It was one she had given him years ago. Engraved on the stock were 3 words she told him every day during training: never miss. Twice. Tight. She moved like a shadow, each step silent despite the crunch of gravel underfoot. She could hear the faint creak of a window above, the soft metallic click of a rifle being loaded. She smiled faintly under the blindfold. Still relying on sight, she whispered to herself. He didn't listen. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of his breath down the cliffside, slow, steady, overconfident. She adjusted her stance, aiming not at where he was, but where he would be when he fired. Inside. Ethan Cole took his first shot, a test round aimed at the grass near where he thought she was. The bullet struck empty ground. By the time he chambered another round, a soft, almost mocking whisper echoed from below the lighthouse. Lesson 1. The wind carries sound faster than a bullet. Before he could react, a single shot cracked through the air. His thermal scope shattered on the floor beside him, splinters of glass scattering across the room. Not a kill shot, it's just a warning. A reminder. He froze, realizing what was happening. She wasn't here to rush him. She wasn't even here to kill him. Not yet. She was here to teach him. One last time, the lighthouse groaned in the wind, its rusted frame creaking like a warning. Far below, waves crashed against jagged rocks, the sound echoing through the night. The air was cold, sharp, and heavy with tension. Shadow, I stood still on the cliffside. Blindfold tied firmly over her eyes. Her rifle rested in her steady hands. She wasn't moving. She wasn't aiming. She was listening. Every gust of wind, every crashing wave, every shift in the old lighthouse above, it all painted a picture in her mind. Inside, Ethan Cole crouched. Near the broken window, rifle ready, his breathing was slow and controlled, but his pulse raced. He knew this wasn't just a mission anymore. This was the test he had always feared, dead maybe wanted. Ethan muttered under his breath, "So, the legend shows up herself, blindfold and all." He checked his position, moving slightly to avoid making noise. But even as he shifted, he knew. She probably heard him, down on the cliff, shadow eyes. Lips curved into a faint, cold smile. She whispered to herself, still overconfident. Still believes silence can hide a heartbeat. She crouched lower, her fingers brushing the wet grass, and angled her rifle toward the sound, not where he was, where he would move if he tried to fire. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying a faint metallic click from the lighthouse. He was loading another round. She tilted her head slightly, listening, counting. 3 seconds, 2, 1. The shot rang out. The bullet screamed through the air, striking the dirt just inches from her feet. Ethan's aim was perfect on any other target. But she was all ready. Moving, her body flowing to the side before the bullet even hit. Her own rifle came up slowly, not rushed, not panicked. Just calm. She didn't fire. Not yet. Instead, she spoke softly, her voice carried by the wind. Lesson 2. A sniper's first shot should never be a warning, should end the fight. The words echoed through the cliffs, carried straight to Ethan's ears. He froze, realizing she wasn't taunting him. She was teaching him, even now. Inside the lighthouse, Ethan's jaw tightened. He muttered, "I don't need lessons anymore." He swung his rifle toward a new angle, aiming for where he thought her voice came from. But by the time he pulled the trigger, she had already moved. The bullet struck a tree trunk, splintering it, She fired back instantly. Her bullet didn't hit him, but it struck the metal railing beside him, the ricochet ringing loud in the silent night. Close enough to make his ears ring. Close enough to remind him who he was facing. Lesson 3. Her voice floated upward, calm and steady. Sound always betrays speed. If you rush, you lose. Ethan's hands tightened on the rifle. He had been her best student, the one who trained longer than anyone, the one who could shoot coins out of the air. But now, facing her, he felt like a beginner again. He glanced at the duffel bag by his feet. Inside were the drives intel that could change everything. He told himself he wasn't a traitor, not really. He was selling information, yes, but only to get out, to build a life where he wouldn't have to take orders anymore. But now, standing here, he knew she wouldn't care about his reasons. She never did. To her, betrayal was betrayal, and the punishment was death. Outside shadow, I crouched lower, her ear tilted toward the lighthouse. She could hear his breathing now, shaky, uneven, despite his training. He was nervous. Good. That gave her control. She whispered softly, just loud enough for the wind to carry. You still hold your breath on the trigger pull. I told you once that pause will kill you. Inside, Ethan's eyes widened. She heard that. From this distance. Through the wind and the waves. His grip tightened, and his jaw set. Not this time, he whispered. He adjusted his position, forcing himself to breathe steadily. Not pause, not give her the signal. The game of patience began. Seconds turned to minutes. Neither of them fired. Neither of them moved. The only sounds were the waves below and the faint whistle of wind through the broken lighthouse frame. Then, suddenly, Ethan made his move. He tossed a small metal object, an empty magazine, out the side window. It clattered against the rocks below, a loud, sharp distraction. In that instant, he shifted his rifle, aiming at where he thought she would react. But she didn't move. Not an inch. Her voice, cool and soft, drifted upward again. Lesson 4. Noise is a lie. I taught you that. You still fell for it. Before he could react, her rifle cracked once. The bullet didn't hit him, it struck the support beam just behind him. The old rotting wood snapped, and the upper railing of the lighthouse collapsed, sending Ethan sprawling onto the floor. His rifle slid across the room, out of reach. He scrambled to his feet, his hand darting toward a sidearm. But another shot rang out, and the gun flew from his grip, the bullet lodging in the wall beside his hand, close enough to burn his skin. Down below, her voice came again, softer now. Lesson 5. If you bring a pistol to a sniper's duel, you've already lost. Ethan froze, his chest heaving. For the first time, he realized what was happening. She wasn't just here to stop him. She was dismantling him mentally. Piece by piece. Every lesson, every word from their past, was now a weapon against him. He raised his hand slowly, his voice shaking. All right, you win. Take me in, just don't kill me. For a moment, there was only silence. Then slowly, her calm voice floated upward. I'm not here to take you in. She paused, letting the words sink in. I'm here to give you a choice. Ethan swallowed hard, the cold wind biting at his face. What choice? He asked. From the cliffs below, her voice came, sharp, as the crack of a bullet. Walk away from the intel, disappear, and never pick up a rifle again. Or stay. And I end this now. Ethan's eyes darted to the duffel bag by his feet. The intel, his ticket out, his entire plan. Or his death sentence. The waves roared louder below, as if the ocean itself waited for his answer. The cliff's shadow eyes rifle stayed steady, the blindfold over her eyes, hiding the one truth Ethan already knew. If he made the wrong move, she wouldn't miss. The wind screamed across the cliffside, carrying salt and cold into the broken windows of the lighthouse. Ethan Cole stood frozen, his hands raised, eyes darting between the duffel bag of intel and the darkness below where he knew she was watching, waiting, blindfolded. But somehow seeing everything, her voice drifted upward, calm but sharp. Choose. Ethan, walk away or face me. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks below filled the silence. Ethan's jaw clenched. He had planned for every possibility: government squads, ambushes, even an airstrike. But not her, not his old mentor. It's the woman who taught him every move, every trick, every skill he had used to disappear. He took a slow step back from the bag, his boots crunching against the old wooden floor. His voice shook, though he tried to sound steady. I didn't want this, you know. I wanted out. No more orders. No more killing for a flag, selling the intel. It was just my way. Out. The wind carried his words down the cliff. Shadow, I didn't move, didn't respond. For a moment, it felt like she hadn't even heard him, and her voice came, colder now. Your way out puts innocent lives at risk. Men and women who trusted you, who trusted me for training you. She paused. And that makes you my responsibility. Ethan's stomach tightened. He knew what those words meant. Responsibility in her language meant only one thing: a bullet. He crouched suddenly, grabbing the duffel bag. Right? In one motion, he swung it over his shoulder and darted toward the lighthouse stairs. If he could get high enough, maybe onto the roof, he could use the height to his advantage, or at least buy time below. Shadow Eye tilted her head slightly. She could hear the faint echo of his boots hitting the metal stairs, each step betraying his path. She didn't chase. She didn't rush. She simply adjusted her stance, aiming her rifle toward the sound, counting his steps. 4, 5, 6. When his 7th step hit the landing, her rifle cracked. The bullet hit the railing inches from his hand, splintering wood and sending rust flying. Her voice followed instantly. Lesson 6. Running makes you louder, not safer. Ethan stumbled back, heart pounding. He ducked behind a wall, clutching. The duffel bag tight? He couldn't outshoot her. He couldn't outrun her. But maybe he could outsmart her. He pulled a small flash grenade from his vest. If he could blind her even briefly, he might have a chance to escape with the intel. Even she couldn't fight what she couldn't sense. Or so he thought. He pulled the pin and tossed it down toward the cliffside, timing the throw to land where he believed she stood. The grenade clattered against the rocks and then rolled back. Right back toward the lighthouse door. His eyes widened. She had heard it, and she'd kicked it back without ever seeing it. The flash grenade burst, filling the air with a blinding white light. Ethan turned his head, but even then, his vision blurred, ears ringing from the explosion. Down on the cliff, she didn't flinch. The blindfold shielded her from the light, and she was already crouched low, listening for the smallest sound in the chaos. The faint stumble of his boots, the shallow, panicked breaths, the scrape of the duffel bag against the floor. Her voice rose once more, steady and cold. Lesson 7. Light blinds the eyes, but never the ears. Before he could recover, her rifle cracked again. This time the bullet didn't just warn. It pierced the strap of the duffel bag, sending it tumbling out of his hands. Sliding across the floor until it stopped at the edge of the broken window, Ethan lunged for it, but froze when another shot hit, this one striking the wood just a hair from his fingers. He pulled his hand back slowly, his chest heaving. He knew what came next. Either he walked away empty-handed, or she ended it. He shouted down toward the cliffs, his voice breaking against the howl of the wind. All right, you've made your point. Take the intel. Take it all. Just let me go. A moment, there was no reply. Only the sound of waves and wind. Then, finally, her calm voice came again. You're not leaving yet. You still haven't made your choice. Ethan's brow furrowed. I did. I dropped the bag. What more do you want? His voice cracked with frustration. Her tone didn't change. I don't care about the bag. Care about the rifle in your hands. And the one choice you haven't made yet? You want to disappear? Fine. But you disappear as a civilian, or not at all. Ethan looked down at the rifle in his grip. It wasn't just a weapon. It was the last piece of the life he had built. The only thing that gave him any edge in the world. If he dropped it, he wasn't just surrendering. He was giving up everything he had ever been. The silence stretched, heavy and cold. Then finally Ethan let out a long, shaky breath. He unclipped the rifle's strap, set it on the floor, and slowly slid it toward the broken window until it teetered over the edge. With one push, he let it fall. The sound of it crashing against the rocks below echoed through the night. For the first time since the standoff began, her voice softened just slightly. Lesson 8. Sometimes surviving means knowing when to stop fighting. Ethan slumped against the wall, his chest rising and falling as he let out a heavy breath. For a brief moment, he thought it was over, that she would take the bag, leave him alive, and vanish back into the night. But then her voice came again, lower now. "Stay there. We're not done yet." Ethan's stomach knotted. "Now," he muttered under his breath. His answer came not in words, but in the distant hum of rotor blades. A helicopter approaching fast. Not hers, not the division's. Another player had just entered the game, and whoever they weren't here to negotiate. The night air grew heavier. The wind still howled, the waves still crashed, but a new sound cut through everything, the steady thump of rotor blades. Another helicopter, close, and coming fast. Ethan Cole froze where he stood, his hands still raised, eyes darting to the broken window. He could see faint lights approaching from the dark horizon, not division lights. These were different tread, not white, private, illegal. Down on the cliff, Shadow Eye tilted her head, listening. The blades were smaller, lighter. Not a heavy transport, an attack bird, which meant only one thing. Whoever was coming wasn't here to rescue anyone. They were here to kill, or take. Ethan's voice cracked as he looked toward the sky. That's not division, is it? His stomach tightened. They're early. I was supposed to meet them after extraction. Not like this. Shadow Eye's voice floated up from below, calm but sharper now. "You sold intel to mercenaries?" Her tone didn't rise, but the edge in her words was enough to make him flinch. "They're not here for the drives, Ethan. They're here to erase the evidence, including you." Ethan backed away from the window, his breath coming faster. He had worked with these people once before. They didn't leave witnesses, not even allies. The helicopter roared closer, its searchlight sweeping across the cliffs, blinding in the darkness. The beacon slid across the grass, then over the lighthouse itself. Inside, Ethan ducked low, shielding his eyes. He shouted toward the darkness below. "Then what are we doing, just standing here? We need to move now." Shadow Eye didn't move, didn't even raise her rifle yet. Her voice came low, calm, and unshaken. "Running will get us both killed. They'll have heat scopes, mines, maybe drones. The only way to survive is to make them think we're already dead." Ethan blinked, turning toward the broken window. "How the hell do we do that?" For the first time, Shadow Eye's voice carried the faintest trace of a smirk. "Follow my lead or die where you stand." Before Ethan could respond, her rifle cracked once. The shot wasn't aimed at the helicopter. It struck the generator. On the cliffside, plunging the entire lighthouse into darkness. The searchlight from above swept wildly, struggling to find a target. Then she fired again. This time, the bullet hit a fuel canister near the base of the tower, one Ethan hadn't even noticed. The explosion lit up the night sky, a towering fireball sending smoke and sparks into the air. The helicopter immediately banked hard, circling back, its crew thinking they had just destroyed their own target. Ethan ducked as debris rained down inside the lighthouse. "What the hell are you doing?" he shouted. "Are you trying to kill us?" Her calm voice floated up from the smoke. Lesson 9. Sometimes the easiest way to survive is to let the enemy think they've already won. Ethan hesitated. Realizing what she meant, the fire, the blackout, the chaos. From the sky, it would look like the explosion had taken them both out. If they stayed still, if they waited, the mercenaries might not even sweep the ground. But then, a new sound split. The night. The sharp hiss of ropes dropping from the helicopter. Figures descended, silhouetted against the faint glow of the fire below. 6, no, 8 men, heavily armed, not here to sweep, here to confirm the kills. Ethan's pulse spiked. He grabbed. His sidearm instinctively then remembered he'd thrown it away. He looked toward the dark cliffs below, where he knew Shadow Eye was still waiting. "What now?" he hissed. "We're outnumbered, outgunned, and I don't even have a weapon." For the first time that night, her calm voice hardened. "You still have your hands, you still have your ears. Stay quiet. Follow my lead." The mercenaries hit the ground, moving fast and low, their night vision goggles glowing faintly green in the dark. 2 stayed near the helicopter, while the rest swept toward the lighthouse. Ethan crouched behind a crumbling wall, his heart pounding. Loud enough he was sure they'd hear it. He whispered, "They'll see us. We can't just hide." Shadow Eye's reply was barely audible, but it carried the weight of command. "They'll see you, not me." She fired once, the bullet striking a loose sheet of metal on the far side of the cliff. The echo was deafening, bouncing between the rocks. The mercenaries whipped around, aiming toward the sound. It was exactly where she wanted them, in the chaos shadow. I moved like a shadow herself, silent, invisible, circling behind the advancing men. Each step was calculated, each breath controlled. She didn't rush, she didn't fire again. Not yet. Ethan crouched in the lighthouse, watched the green goggles sweep closer. His throat tightened. Every instinct screamed at him to run. He stayed still. For once, he trusted her plan. Then, it happened fast. A hand came from the darkness, pulling one mercenary into the shadows. No gunfire, no noise, just a muffled grunt, and the sound of a body hitting the dirt. Ethan's eyes darted around wildly, whispered, "She's taking them one by one." Another mercenary vanished into the dark, his rifle clattering softly to the ground. Ethan swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the edge of the window. He had trained with her. He had seen her do this to enemies before. But watching it now, with no sound but the waves and the wind, it was almost inhuman. Within minutes, 3 of the 8 were gone. No gunfire, no screams, just silence. The remaining 5 tightened their formation, moving closer together. That was a mistake. Shadow Eye's rifle cracked once. 1 shot. 1 man down. Panic erupted in the group. Ethan finally saw his chance. One of the fallen mercenaries' rifles lay on the ground just outside the lighthouse. Crawling low, he reached through the broken window, fingers brushing the cold metal. Another shot rang out from the cliffs, distracting the mercenaries just long enough for him to pull the weapon inside. For the first time since this nightmare began, Ethan felt a flicker of control. He loaded the rifle, his hands steady, despite the chaos. Down below, Shadow Eye's voice came through the darkness once more. Lesson 10. A good sniper never fights alone. Cover me. Ethan hesitated. After everything, after her warnings, she was trusting him, even now. The remaining mercenaries regrouped near the lighthouse entrance, guns raised, their night vision goggles scanning the shadows. Ethan steadied his breath, aimed carefully through the shattered window, and fired. One mercenary dropped instantly. From the cliff's shadow, I took the opening. Her shot echoed a half-second later, dropping another. The last 3 spun wildly, confused by the crossfire. Ethan fired again, dropping 1 more. The final 2 backed toward the helicopter, shouting into their radios for backup. But before they could call for extraction, Shadow Eye's final shot split the night. Both dropped where they stood. The cliffs went silent again. Only the wind and waves remained. Ethan lowered the rifle, his chest heaving. He looked toward the dark cliffs, where her silhouette was barely visible against the glow of the dying fire. He muttered, almost to himself, still lethal, still untouchable. Then her voice came once more, calm and unshaken. "Pick up the bag. We're leaving, before more of them arrive." Ugh. Ethan slung the duffel over his shoulder, his mind racing. He had almost died twice tonight, and yet somehow he was still alive. Because of her, but deep down, he knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The fire from the fuel tank still burned faintly, casting flickering shadows across the cliffs. The mercenaries lay scattered, their weapons silent. Only the wind and crashing waves remained. Ethan Cole adjusted the heavy duffel bag on his shoulder, his breath still unsteady. His eyes scanned the dark coastline, half expecting more enemies to appear from the shadows. But none came. From below, Shadow Eye moved out from the darkness, silent and controlled, her rifle slung across her back. She climbed the narrow path toward the lighthouse, each step deliberate, till she was standing in front of him. She spoke softly, but her words cut through the sound of the wind. "They weren't here just for you, Ethan, or the intel. Someone wanted me erased too?" Ethan blinked, taken aback. "What are you talking about?" "The division sent you to take me down, not the other way around." He gestured toward the dead mercenaries. "These guys weren't division, they were mine. I cut a deal. They had no reason to go after you." Shadow Eye tilted her head slightly, her blindfold still tied over her eyes. Her voice was calm, but there was something sharper beneath it. "They were sent to kill us both, which means someone above the division wanted this cleanup to end with no survivors." Ethan's stomach turned. He had thought the division was the threat. Now he realized someone even higher was pulling the strings. Someone who didn't care about loyalty or sides. Only silence. A faint hum reached their ears, not rotor blades. This time, but the low, distant growl of engines. More vehicles, coming from inland. Whoever had sent the mercenaries wasn't finished. Ethan's grip on the duffel tightened. "We need to get off this cliff. Those are more of them. We won't last another round." Shadow Eye turned slightly toward the sound, her expression unreadable beneath the blindfold. "There's a path down to the beach. Tide is low. We move along the shore. Stay low, stay silent. They see us, we're dead." Ethan nodded quickly. For once he didn't argue. Not after what he'd just seen her do. They moved quickly but quietly. Shadow Eye leading with precise, practiced steps. Every few seconds she would pause, head tilted, listening to the wind, the waves. And the faint growl of engines above Ethan kept his voice low as they descended the rocky path. "Whoever's behind this, what do they want? It's not just the intel, then what?" Her reply was short, almost flat. "They want the legend gone. No witnesses, no loose ends. You were just leverage." She paused. "They want people to forget I ever existed." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And if they get their way, I disappear too." The path opened up to a stretch of cold black sand. The tide lapped quietly at the shore, the horizon stretching dark and empty. But in the distance, a faint glimmer of lights marked a small dock. An old fishing boat rocked gently, barely visible through the fog. Ethan pointed. "Is that ours?" "Shadow." I didn't answer immediately. She crouched low, listening. Finally, she nodded once. "Extraction point. We reach it. We vanish." Before they could take another step, headlights flared on the cliff above. Two armored trucks rolled into view, their beams sweeping across the beach. Ethan swore under his breath. "They found us already. What do? We can't outrun trucks on open sand." Shadow Eye's voice stayed calm, but her tone sharpened. Lesson 11. Speed is useless without shadows. We use the fog. She grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the waterline. The fog was thicker there, the mist rising where the waves crashed. Their boots sank into the wet sand as they moved. Every step, careful, deliberate. Above, the truck stopped at the cliff's edge. Doors opened. Voices carried faintly on the wind, men shouting orders. They weren't division soldiers. These were private, ruthless, paid to erase. Ethan glanced back, his heart pounding. They're sweeping. If they spot us, we're done. He clutched the duffel tighter. Why not just dump this thing and run? They only care about the drives. Eye's reply was low and firm. They don't care about the drives anymore. They care about us. Dumping it won't change a thing. Suddenly, a flare shot into the air above the beach. Red light flooded the sand, turning the fog into a glowing curtain. Ethan froze, realizing they were exposed. Shadow Eye moved instantly, shoving him down flat against the wet sand. Lesson 12. The first flare is never the last. Stay down. Another flare shot up, landing closer this time. Voices shouted from the cliff, boots pounding against the rocks as men began descending. Shadow Eye unshouldered her rifle, her blindfolded face still calm. She tilted her head slightly, listening, counting. 6 men coming down. Maybe more above Ethan? Whispered, we can't take them all. Not without cover. His voice trembled, but he kept it low. Her reply was steady. We don't need to take them all. We just need to make them think we're ghosts. Before he could ask what she meant, she fired once, not at the men, at the flare. The shot shattered at midair, plunging the beach back into darkness. The sudden blackness disoriented the descending men. Their shouts grew louder, confused. 2 stumbled, sliding down the rocks. The rock tumbled, crashing into the descent route and blocking half of them. Ethan stared, wide-eyed. You're not even shooting them. You're just controlling the field. Shadow Eye didn't reply. She simply gestured toward the foggy shoreline. Move. They crawled along the waterline, each step timed between the shouts and crashes above. The fog wrapped around them, hiding their movements like a curtain. Finally, the dock came into view again, closer now. The small fishing boat bobbed gently, its engine faintly humming. Ethan's chest loosened slightly. They were almost there, but then a new sound cut through the fog. A sharp, distinct click, the sound of a safety being switched off. Right behind them, a voice low and cold followed. Going somewhere? Ethan froze. He didn't recognize the voice. Shadow Eye did. For the first time all night, her expression changed. A flicker of tension crossed her calm face. She turned her head slightly, her voice quieter than before. Stay very still, Ethan. This isn't a mercenary. This is something else. The fog swirled thick around them, turning the world into a blur of gray and shadow. The ocean whispered beside them, waves brushing the shore like a warning. But the voice behind them was older than the wind, low, measured, and terrifyingly calm. Hands up. Slowly, Ethan froze, his muscles tight. He raised his hands, careful not to move too fast. The duffel bag slid from his shoulder into the wet sand with a soft thud. He didn't even dare look back. Who are you? He asked, his voice shaking. Division? Mercenary? Or someone else? The man behind them stepped closer, his boots crunching softly against the sand. No, not division, not a hired gun. A faint chuckle followed. I'm the one they send when they don't want anyone to know what happened, the one who erases everything. Ethan's blood ran cold. A cleaner, not just a soldier. An executioner. Someone who never left a trace. Shadow Eye didn't raise her hands. She stayed crouched, head slightly tilted as if listening to the rhythm of his breathing. Her blindfolded face gave nothing away. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm. I know that voice. Dante Hale, they said you disappeared years ago. The man chuckled again, stepping closer. I didn't disappear. I was promoted. They only call me for the jobs no one else can finish. His boot stopped just a few feet behind them. One of those jobs now. Ethan finally turned his head slightly enough to catch a glimpse. The man was tall, clad in black, tactical. Gear, a suppressed rifle in one hand, a combat knife sheathed on his chest. No insignia, no identifying marks. Ghost. Ethan's throat tightened. So, let me guess. No negotiation, no chance to walk away. His voice was bitter. You're just here to make sure no one leaves this beach alive. It was almost casual. Exactly. We're sloppy, Cole. Selling intel, drawing too much heat. And you, he tilted his head slightly toward Shadow Eye, you're just a loose end they've been waiting to cut. The sound of waves filled. The pause. Ethan swallowed hard. Even with Shadow Eye here, he knew this man was different. The calm in his voice. The way he moved. He was no ordinary assassin. But Shadow Eye finally rose to her feet. Slowly, deliberately. She still didn't raise her hands. Her voice was cool, almost detached. So, the division sends their phantom to erase their mistakes. But tell me, Dante, are you here because they ordered it? Or because you finally want to settle your own grudge? Ethan's eyes widened. Grudge. You know this guy? Dante's tone darkened. Oh, she knows me. She left me bleeding out on a rooftop in Caracas 5 years ago. Said I wasn't ready for the kill shot. Turns out I was. And now it's her turn to see how it feels. The fog thickened around them, the silence more suffocating than the cold. Ethan slowly lowered his hands, his mind racing. Two of the most lethal operatives the division had ever trained, face to face, in the dark, with him caught between. He muttered under his breath, "Great. I'm stuck between a ghost and a legend." Shadow Eye's head tilted slightly, listening. Her tone was still calm, but her stance shifted subtly. Lesson 13. Every ghost leaves a sound, even when they think they're silent. Before Ethan could ask what she meant, her hand moved so fast it was almost a blur. She grabbed a handful of wet sand, flicking it back over her shoulder in a wide arc. The grains struck Dante's goggles, momentarily blinding him. The ghost didn't shout, didn't curse, simply stepped back, raising his rifle in one smooth motion. But Shadow Eye had already dropped low, rolling into the fog. Her rifle came. Off her back, the barrel glinting faintly in the dim light. Ethan dove to the side, grabbing the duffel bag as bullets whispered through the fog above him. Each suppressed shot was near silent. But the impact of the rounds in the wet sand felt like thunder. Shadow Eye's voice came from somewhere in the mist, steady and controlled. "Ethan, keep moving, stay low, and don't fire unless I say." Ethan gritted his teeth. He wanted to shoot back. He wanted to do something. But he knew he'd only give away his position. The fog turned into a deadly chessboard. Every sound mattered.
Oh, yes.
Every step had to be measured. Ethan crawled along the shoreline, his breaths shallow, the cold water soaking through his clothes. Somewhere ahead, a faint click echoed the sound of Dante switching firing modes. Shadow Eye froze, tilting her head. Her reply came in a whisper, just loud enough for Ethan to hear. Lesson 14. A ghost's weapon is louder than his steps. Count the clicks, and you'll know when he's about to fire. Ethan held still, listening. Not another click, then silence, and then a single shot, but the bullet didn't hit them. It hit the boat, the one waiting for extraction. The engine hissed, then caught fire, a small flame licking at its hole. Ethan's eyes went wide. It's cutting off our escape. He turned toward the fog, his voice sharp. What now?
Oh.
We're trapped on this beach. Shadow, I didn't panic. She crouched lower, rifle steady. We improvise. Dante's voice echoed through the mist, mocking. 2 predators, 1 beach. No boats. No way out. Only one of you is leaving alive, if at all. Ethan clenched his fists, his chest tightening. He didn't know who to fear more now, the ghost he couldn't see, or the blindfolded sniper who never missed. The fog grew denser, the world closing in around them. Every breath sounded too loud. Every heartbeat felt like a signal, then without. Warning, a flare burst overhead, flooding the beach with red light. The fog glowed like blood. Dante was no longer invisible. He stood 20 yards away, rifle aimed directly at Shadow Eye. Ethan barely had time to react before the first shot cracked. The round missed by inches, striking the sand near her feet. She didn't flinch. She didn't move. She simply lowered her rifle to her hip and waited. The next second, the fog exploded with motion. The red flare burned overhead, painting the fog in shades of crimson and black. Every shadow seemed alive. Every sound felt like a warning. 20 yards apart, 2 of the most lethal operatives the division had ever trained stood still. One blindfolded, calm and silent. The other, a ghost, dressed in black, rifle-steady eyes, hidden behind smeared goggles. Ethan crouched behind a driftwood log, gripping the duffel bag like it was a lifeline. His pulse pounded so loudly he was sure they could hear it. 2 predators, both faster, sharper, deadlier than him. If he moved wrong, he'd be the first to die. Dante broke the silence first. His voice carried over the waves, smooth and cold. 5 years, Shadow Eye. 5 years of waiting. Tonight we end it. Shadow Eye's head tilted slightly, as if listening to the rhythm of the flare crackle. Her voice was calm. Lesson 15. Patience wins fights, not anger. Dante's rifle shifted, the barrel aimed squarely at her chest. Still teaching. Even at the end. Fine. Here's my lesson. The one who fires first usually walks away. His finger tightened on the trigger. The shot cracked, but Shadow Eye wasn't there. She had dropped low in a single fluid motion, the bullet tearing through the fog where her head had been. Her counter shot came instantly, not aimed at Dante, but at the flare above. Flare shattered, plunging the beach back into darkness. Ethan's eyes widened. She's fighting him blind. And in total dark, his breath caught. No, she's making him blind too. For a few heartbeats, nothing but the sound of waves and the faint pop of cooling metal from the flares remains. Then, a whisper of sand behind them. Dante was on the move. Ethan pressed himself lower, trying to vanish into the wet ground. His mind raced. He couldn't see where Dante was. Couldn't even tell which way the ghost was circling. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he stayed still. Shadow Eye's voice cut through the darkness, soft and firm. Lesson 16. A ghost hunts sound, not sight. Make none. She crouched lower, rifle loose in her hands. Her breathing slowed until it was barely audible. The waves covered every faint shift of her stance. She was becoming part of the beach itself. Ethan, however, felt his breath getting ragged. Too loud, too fast, bit his lip, trying to quiet himself. Then it happened. A faint scrape Dante's boot on a rock behind them. Shadow Eye moved like lightning, rolling to the side as Dante's suppressed shot hissed through the fog. It missed her by inches. She fired back, not at his body, at the ground near his feet. The round struck sand, sending grit flying into the air. The tiny sound revealed his exact position. She adjusted a fraction, pulled the trigger again.
Elvis.
Shot grazed his shoulder, forcing him to retreat into the fog. Dante didn't shout, didn't make a sound. But Ethan heard his boots hit the wet sand faster now. The ghost was circling again. Ethan realized something horrifying. If this kept going, it wasn't going to be about who was the better shot. It was going to be about who made a mistake first. And he was the weakest link. His breaths shifting. In the sand, every sound he made could give them away. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay still. But then his boot slipped slightly on the wet sand, the faint crunch echoing louder than he expected. Dante heard it. The ghost didn't. Fire at Shadow Eye. He fired at Ethan. The shot hit the sand inches from Ethan's face, kicking wet grit into his eyes. He flinched, gasping, his hands flying up instinctively. That single sound was all Dante needed. Another shot hissed through the fog. Closer this time, he was zeroing in. Ethan scrambled backward, panic rising. Shadow Eye, he's on me. Before another round could come, Shadow Eye fired. Her bullet struck a rock near Dante's path, the sharp crack echoing through the mist. The sound masked Ethan's movement, giving him a chance to crawl toward cover. Shadow Eye's voice followed, calm but firm. Lesson 17. Stay calm, or you're already dead. Ethan ducked behind another piece of driftwood, his heart hammering. I can't do this. He's too fast, too quiet. How do you even fight something like him? Shadow Eye's reply was low, almost like a whisper. You don't chase ghosts. You make ghosts chase you. Ethan frowned, not understanding. Then he saw her. She reached down, grabbed a small metal shell casing from the sand, and tossed it far to their left. It clattered loudly against a rock. Dante took the bait. A single near-silent step toward the sound. And that's when Shadow Eye fired. Her shot hit, not fatal, but enough to make him stumble. The ghost hissed sharply, the first sound of pain. He'd made Ethan's eyes widened. She actually hit him. Dante, however, didn't fall. He dropped low, switching to his knife as he vanished into the fog again. No more gunfire. Now it was close quarters, silent, deadly. Shadow Eye slung her rifle, drawing a combat knife of her own. Her stance shifted, low, balanced, ready. For the first time tonight, even she looked tense. Ethan crouched lower, clutching the duffel tight. His mind screamed at him to run, but his body stayed frozen, watching two shadows vanish into the fog, and listening as the sounds of steel meeting steel echoed through the night. The fog wrapped around the beach like a living thing, thick and heavy, muffling every sound except the ocean and the clash of steel. Somewhere in the gray mist, two shadows moved fast, silent, deadly. Dante, the division's ghost. Shadow Eye, the blindfolded sniper no one believed could survive this long there. Knives met with a dull clink, each strike fast and precise, every movement meant to kill, not wound. There were no wasted motions, no wild swings, just death, waiting for a single mistake. Ethan crouched low behind a log, clutching the duffel bag against his chest like a shield. He couldn't see them clearly. Only faint shapes moving in and out of the fog, each clash of metal followed by silence. A predator's dance. He whispered to himself, almost a prayer. Come on. Come on, Shadow, I finish him. But deep down, he knew this fight was different. Dante wasn't panicking. It wasn't reckless. Every time Shadow Eye struck, he blocked, redirected, moved, like he had been trained to counter her specifically, and that terrified Ethan. A grunt broke through the mist. Shadow Eye, for the first time, showing a flicker of pain. Not a scream, just a breath, sharp and quick. Dante had cut her. Not deep, but enough to show he was closing in. Ethan's gut twisted. If she went down, he'd be next. And he wasn't ready. Not to fight, not to die. Not like this. He looked around frantically. The boat was burning, the fog hiding everything beyond 20 feet. No backup, no escape, just him. And two killers? The sound of boots sliding in wet sand snapped his focus back. Two shadows emerged briefly through the fog, Dante pressing forward, Shadow Eye dodging low. Her blindfolded face stayed calm, but her movements had slowed, even slightly. She was bleeding. Ethan's heart pounded in his ears. He glanced at the duffel bag. Inside, among the stolen drives and cash, was a compact, division-issued sidearm. He had tossed it in earlier, thinking it might be worth something later. Now it might be the only thing keeping him alive. He reached for it, hands shaking. Shadow Eye's voice cut through the mist, sharp but controlled. Ethan, stay down. Her tone wasn't a request, it was a warning. But Ethan's hands still closed around the cold grip of the pistol. He had no training, not like them. But he wasn't going to sit here and wait to die. Another clash of steel. Rang out closer this time. Then a sudden shift. Dante slammed Shadow Eye backward against a rock. The sound of her breath leaving her chest audible, even over the waves. Ethan's body moved before his mind could stop it. He stood. Raised the pistol with trembling hands. The fog seemed to close in tighter, the red glow of a dying flare casting faint light on the two figures. Dante had his knife raised, about to strike. Shadow Eye pinned, one hand struggling to block his wrist. Ethan shouted, "Get off her!" His voice cracked. The gun felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Dante turned his head slightly, his goggles glinting faintly. Then he moved. Ghost didn't retreat. He lunged, not at Shadow Eye, but at Ethan, covering the distance in seconds, knife glinting in the dim light. Ethan froze, panic surging. His fingers squeezed the trigger too early. The bullet hissing wide into the fog. Dante's shadow loomed closer, knife raised for the kill. Ethan stumbled backward, his heel catching on the wet sand. He was going to die. He knew it. But then, Shadow Eye moved. She swept her leg low, catching Dante's ankle and sending him off balance. It wasn't enough to drop him, but it forced him to pivot. And in that split second, Ethan fired again. This time, the shot hit. The bullet struck Dante in the side, just below his ribs. He staggered, his knife dropping into the sand with a dull thud. No scream, just a grunt as he turned his masked face toward Ethan. Ethan's hand shook violently. He had shot a man before he even realized he had pulled the trigger. And for a moment, the beach went silent. Dante didn't fall immediately, staggered. Back a few steps, one hand pressed to his wound. Then, with surprise and calm, he reached for a small device clipped to his belt. A beacon, a tracker. If he activated it, reinforcements would be on them in minutes. Shadow, I, still kneeling, snapped her wrist. Her knife flew like a dart, striking the device cleanly and sending it spinning into the surf. Dante let out a low, bitter laugh. You think this ends here? His voice was strained but steady. You're already dead, both of you. You just don't know it yet. And then, finally, he collapsed into the sand. Ethan stood frozen, the pistol still raised, his breath sharp and uneven. His ears rang. His hands felt numb. He had killed before in training exercises, simulated missions, but never like this. Never real. He looked at Shadow Eye, his voice shaking. I shot him. I didn't even mean to. Shadow Eye stood slowly, retrieving her knife from the sand. Her face was calm, but her words were firm. Lesson 18. Hesitation kills faster than bullets. Remember that? Ethan swallowed hard. The weight of what he had done settled in his chest like stone. But before he could respond, a new sound echoed through the fog. Engines. Not trucks this time. Not a helicopter. Something bigger. A low, heavy hum from beyond the waves. Multiple vessels, approaching the shoreline. Shadow Eye turned her head slightly, listening. Her voice stayed calm, but even she tightened her grip on her rifle. There. Not done. That wasn't the last hunter. Ethan's blood ran cold. His hands tightened around the pistol, though his grip still trembled. He glanced at the burning boat, then toward the approaching sounds. How many more? He asked quietly. Her reply was short, almost cold. Enough to finish the job, unless we disappear first. The fog pressed in heavier, like it was trying to swallow the beach hole. The burning remains of the boat hissed as waves licked at its charred hull, sending up thin trails of smoke beyond the surf. Low hums grew louder. Engines. Not one, not two, several. Dark shapes cut through the mist, closing in fast. Ethan's chest tightened. They're sending boats now? How many? Shadow Eye tilted her head, listening carefully. Her blindfolded face stayed calm, but her grip on her rifle tightened. 3 vessels, maybe 4. Each holds at least 6 men, fully. Armed, they're not here to question us. They're here to finish the job. Ethan swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the beach. The cliff behind them was too steep to climb. The burning boat was useless. The fog gave them cover, but only for a little while. Once the soldiers hit the shore, it would be a straight hunt. We're trapped, he said quietly. His voice cracked. No boats, nowhere to run. What's the plan, Shadow Eye? Because I'm not ready to, she cut him off. When escape is impossible, make your enemy chase ghosts instead of targets. Ethan frowned. Ghosts? What does that even mean? She crouched, grabbing a few objects from Dante's fallen gear, a spare rifle magazine, a small smoke canister, and a combat knife. Her hands moved fast, assembling something Ethan didn't understand. Within seconds, she planted the improvised device into the wet sand, facing the incoming boats. Ethan blinked. What is that supposed to do? You've got rifles, explosives, night vision. Shadow Eye stood, her voice calm as ever. They won't see us, they'll see something else. Before he could ask, she grabbed his arm and pulled him toward a cluster of boulders farther down the beach. Move. Stay low. Stay quiet. And don't stop, no matter what you hear. The engines grew louder, closer, until faint searchlights began cutting through the fog. The beams swept the shoreline, faintly illuminating the drifting smoke from the ruined boat. Through the mist, the outlines of black-clad soldiers became visible, their weapons raised as they prepared to land. Ethan crouched behind the boulders, his breath shaky. His knuckles were white around the pistol. He whispered, Vel, sweep this whole beach. We can't hide forever. Shadow Eye didn't answer. She simply pulled the pin on the small canister, tossing it toward the center of the beach. A hiss filled the air as it began releasing a dense, dark smoke. Then, a sudden pop. The device she had planted earlier ignited, creating a flickering heat signature in the fog, a false target for their sensors. From the boats, shouts rang out. They're right there, thermals picking them up. Multiple rifles opened fire, rounds tearing into the mist where the heat signature burned brightest. Bullets struck sand and rocks, but nowhere near Shadow Eye or Ethan. Ethan's eyes widened as he realized what she had done. They're shooting at nothing. Shadow Eye's voice was low. That gives us 60 seconds to move. No more. They sprinted along the shoreline, staying low, the waves splashing against their boots. Every step felt too loud, every breath too heavy. But the chaos behind them covered the sound. They reached the far end of the beach, where the fog grew even thicker. Ahead, a narrow path wound up through the cliffs, barely visible through the mist. It wasn't a safe route. Steep, jagged, one wrong step and a fall could kill them. Ethan hesitated. That's the way out? Stared at the narrow trail, his stomach twisting. We'll break our necks before we get halfway up. Shadow Eye adjusted the strap of her rifle, her tone firm. Lesson 20. Fear of falling kills. More men than bullets. Follow my steps exactly. Don't look down. Before Ethan could argue, she started climbing. They moved quickly but carefully, each handhold deliberate. The mist clung to the cliffside, making the rock slick beneath their boots. Below, the sound of gunfire still echoed as the soldiers fired at ghosts. Halfway up, Ethan slipped, his foot skidding on a wet rock. He gasped, clinging to the cliff face. The drop below looked endless through the fog. Shadow Eye paused above him, her blindfolded head tilting slightly. She extended a hand down, steady and calm. Grip. Now. Ethan grabbed her hand, pulling himself back onto the narrow ledge. His chest heaved. How are you so calm? We're one slip from dying. Her reply was simple. I stopped fearing death a long time ago. They reached the top of the cliffs, breathless but alive. From here, the ocean stretched out like a void. The enemy boats still tiny shadows in the fog below. The burning wreckage of the old boat flickered like a dying beacon. Ethan collapsed onto the wet grass, his arms shaking. I can't keep doing this. Every corner, every second. Someone's trying to kill us. Shadow. I crouched near the edge, listening to the distant engines and shouts. Her voice stayed even. They won't stop until the division confirms we're dead. This is just the first wave. Ethan's head snapped up. The first wave? How many waves are there? She turned her head slightly toward him. As many as it takes to erase us. A new sound cut through the fog. Not boats this time. Rotors, a helicopter. Low, steady, closing in fast. Its searchlight pierced the mist like a blade, sweeping across the cliffside. Ethan scrambled to his feet. They're everywhere. We can't outrun that. What now, Shadow? I finally turned toward him, her calm expression unchanged. We don't outrun it. She slung her rifle across her shoulder, pulling a small transmitter from her vest. We call something faster. Before Ethan could ask what she meant, she pressed a button on the transmitter. A faint blue light blinked once, then again, and somewhere in the distance, beyond the fog, another sound began to rise. A low, rumbling engine. Something big. And it was coming their way. The low rumble grew louder, rolling through the fog like distant thunder. It wasn't the boats. It wasn't the division's helicopter. This sound was heavier, grittier, like armored engines cutting through the night. Ethan's hand tightened around his pistol. His voice trembled. Please tell me that's not another strike team, Shadow. I didn't answer immediately. Tilted her head, listening to the rhythm of the sound. Her blindfolded face stayed calm, but her lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile. No, that's ours. Ethan's eyes widened. Ours. What do you mean ours? We don't have anyone. Shadow Eye finally turned her head toward him. Lesson 21. A sniper never fights alone. She just waits for the right moment to call her backup. The sound grew clearer. Through the heavy mist, two faint shapes emerged, not vehicles, but hovercrafts. Low, fast, silent but for the deep hum of their engines. Their hulls cut across the waves, spraying mist as they approached the cliffs. Each bore no markings. No flags, no division insignia, but their heavy machine guns and armored plating were unmistakable. These weren't civilian craft. They were built for war, Ethan stumbled forward, eyes wide. You called mercenaries? Private soldiers? Shadow Eye shook her head once. Not mercenaries. Old allies. People who owe me favors. People who hate the division more than we do. The division helicopter circled above, its searchlight cutting through the fog. The approaching hovercrafts didn't slow down. One of their gunners aimed skyward. Single shot, not a bullet but a flare rocket streaked into the air. It burst near the helicopter, forcing it to bank hard to avoid a collision. The distraction gave the hovercrafts a clear path to the base of the cliffs. From one of them, a rope ladder unfurled, dangling toward the rocks below. Shadow Eye grabbed Ethan by the arm, pulling him toward the edge. Time to move, unless you want to explain yourself to the division in chains. Ethan stared at the ladder, then at the ocean far below. His stomach dropped. You want us to jump? It's a 60-foot drop. If I missed that ladder, Shadow Eye's tone stayed firm. Lesson 22. Fear is louder than gunfire. Jump before it routs you to the ground. She didn't wait for him to reply. She slung her rifle over her back, stepped to the edge, and without a single pause, she leaped. Ethan froze for a heartbeat, watching her disappear into the mist below. Then, voices echoed behind him. Division soldiers had reached the top of the cliffs. He didn't have a choice. He ran and jumped. The cold air ripped past him, the fog swallowing everything. For a moment, he felt weightless, and his hands caught the rope ladder, his shoulders nearly wrenching from the force. Clung on for dear life, his boots slipping on the wet rungs. Shadow Eye was already below him. Descending calmly, her movements controlled despite the sway of the ladder. She didn't even seem to breathe faster. Above, shouts grew louder. The division soldiers had spotted them. Rifle fire cracked, bullets zipping past through the fog. One round hit the hovercraft's hull with a sharp clang. Move faster. Ethan gasped, climbing down as quickly as he could without falling. Another burst of gunfire whistled by, one bullet grazing the rope just above his head. The fibers frayed, but the ladder held. Shadow Eye's voice carried up to him, steady as ever. Lesson 23. Panic makes you slow. Focus on the next rung, not the bullets. They reached the bottom, dropping into the hovercraft's open bay as its engines roared. The craft surged forward, spray from the waves soaking them instantly. The second hovercraft followed close behind, its gunners laying suppressive fire toward the cliffs. Ethan collapsed onto the metal deck, gasping for air. We made it. We actually made it. Shadow Eye crouched near him, checking the mag in her rifle before locking it back into place. Her face stayed calm, but her head tilted slightly toward the cliffs. They're not finished. Not yet. Ethan glanced up. Through the fog, he could still see the faint outline of the division helicopter. It had recovered from the flare scare, and was now banking toward them again, spotlight sweeping the waves. One of the hovercraft gunners shouted, "They're calling in drones!" "We've got 2 minutes tops before we're boxed in." Ethan's throat tightened. "So, escape the beach just to get blown out of the water?" Shadow Eye finally looked at him, her tone colder now. "No, we're not running anymore." Stood, moving to the mounted machine gun at the bow of the hovercraft. Her hands rested lightly on the grips, her blindfolded face turned toward the approaching sound of the helicopter. Ethan stared at her, his voice trembling. You can't seriously shoot down a helicopter blindfolded." She didn't answer. She simply tightened her grip. Waiting. Listening. The low thump of rotor blades grew louder. Closer. The searchlight beam cut through the fog. Scanning the waves, Shadow Eye whispered, almost to herself, Lesson 24. When your enemy thinks you can't see, you strike where they least expect. And then she opened fire. The machine gun roared, its deafening bursts cutting through the fog like rolling thunder. Tracer rounds streaked upward, glowing faint lines in the mist as they tore toward the circling helicopter. Ethan ducked behind a crate on the hovercraft deck, covering his ears as hot brass casings rained down around him. Shadow Eye. Even blindfolded, she didn't hesitate. Her hands controlled the heavy gun with precision, every burst calculated, not a single wasted round. Above them, The helicopter veered to the side, its spotlight jerking wildly. The gunfire hadn't hit it yet, but it forced the pilot to break formation. The hunters weren't used to being hunted. Drones incoming. One of the hovercraft gunners shouted. Ethan looked up. Through gaps in the fog, small dark shapes zipped toward them fast, sleek recon drones, each carrying a small payload that could ruin their craft if they got close. Shadow, I didn't look up. Her voice cut through the roar of engines and gunfire, calm as always. Lesson 25. Never shoot the obvious threat first. The hidden ones kill faster. She released the machine gun and drew her rifle. In one smooth motion, she crouched, angled the barrel upward, and began firing short, sharp bursts. Each round found its mark, one drone, then another, plummeting into the waves with faint explosions. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had seen elite marksmen before, but nothing like this. She couldn't see the drones. Not really. But she heard them, the faint change in the wind, the difference in the hum of each engine. And somehow, that was enough. 3 left, another gunner shouted. The remaining drones zigzagged, closing in fast. Helicopter circled back. Lining up its own shot, waves churned with chaos as the division forces tightened their trap. Ethan's heart pounded. He glanced at the crate he was hiding behind. Inside, he knew, were explosives, emergency charges used to disable pursuers. If they got too close, they'd all be dead anyway. Shadow Eye's voice called out, sharp this time. The crate? To your left, open it. Charge 3-second fuse. Throw it high when I say. Ethan scrambled to his knees, his hands trembling as he yanked open the crate. Inside, a set of compact charges sat nestled in foam. He grabbed one, feeling its weight, his pulse quickening. 3-second fuse. That's barely enough time to do. It, she snapped, her tone leaving no room for doubt. When I count down, I swallowed hard. For the second time tonight, he realized he didn't have a choice. The drones swept lower.
Ow.
Their small engines whining sharply now. The helicopter's side gun opened up, rounds splashing into the waves near the hovercraft. One burst tore into the side plating, sending shards of metal flying across the deck. Shadow Eye fired again, taking down another drone mid-dive. Only 2 remained. The trap was closing now. She shouted. 3, 2, 1. Throw. Ethan yanked the pin and hurled the charge upward with all his strength. It arced through the fog, spinning, and at the apex of its climb, it detonated. The explosion ripped through the air, a blinding flash and sharp concussive wave. Both remaining drones were caught in the blast, their shredded remains tumbling into the sea. The helicopter jerked violently, its pilot thrown off balance by the shockwave. It dipped dangerously low, rotors slicing the fog just above the waves. Shadow Eye didn't hesitate. She swung the machine gun back around, braced her. Stanson unleashed another controlled burst. This time, the round struck true. The helicopter's tail sparked, then ignited. The pilot tried to pull up, but it was too late. The craft spun once, twice, and then slammed into the ocean with a fiery splash. The hovercraft jolted as a wave from the crash rocked its hull. Ah! Ethan clung to the deck, his heart hammering in his chest. He looked toward Shadow Eye, who calmly released the smoking machine gun and slung her rifle back over her shoulder. Is that it? Ethan asked, his voice trembling. Did we just wipe out a division strike force? Are we safe? Shadow Eye crouched, pressing 2 fingers to the deck to feel the vibrations. Her head tilted slightly, her expression unchanged. No, the sea is too quiet now. That wasn't the full strike group. The division doesn't quit after one wave. As if on cue, a faint, rhythmic sound carried over the waves. Not engines, not rotors, something heavier, something closer. The hovercraft captain, grizzled man with a scar running down his cheek, looked toward the sound with narrowed eyes. Depth charges, he muttered. They're not just chasing us on the surface. They've got subs below. We're in deep water now. Ethan's eyes widened. Submarines? Out. Are you kidding me? They're throwing submarines at us now? The captain barked an order to his crew, and the hovercrafts began to veer sharply. Engines roaring as they cut a new path through the fog. But the rhythmic pulses grew louder, closer, like an invisible predator circling beneath the waves. Shadow. I finally stood, her voice as calm as ever. Lesson 26. When the enemy comes from below, the surface is no longer your battleground. You take the fight down, or you don't leave at all. Ethan turned toward her, staring in disbelief. Wait, you're not actually suggesting we go into the water to fight submarines, right? Shadow Eye's head turned slightly, the faintest, smirk touching her lips. No, Cole, we're not fighting them. We're taking one. The fog hung heavy, hiding the horizon, but beneath the rolling waves. The rhythmic pulse of sonar pings grew louder, closer, predatory. The division wasn't chasing anymore. It was hunting. Ethan gripped the hovercraft railing, his knuckles white. Shadow Eye, I don't care how good you are. We can't fight submarines. That's insane. Shadow Eye crouched beside him, calm as always. Her blindfold shifted slightly as she adjusted the strap of her rifle. We're not fighting them, Cole. We're stealing one. Lesson 27. If you can't outrun the hunter, become the predator they never see coming. The hovercraft captain barked orders in the background, his crew scrambling to prep. Gear. A hatch opened near the center of the deck, revealing two compact submersible pods, sleek, black, and silent. Each built to carry two people beneath the waves. Ethan's jaw dropped. You had these the whole time? Why didn't we just leave in one of those? The captain shot him a sharp look. Pods are for infiltration, not running. Division subs would pick us off in seconds out here. Shadow Eye turned toward the pods, checking their oxygen seals. That's why we're not running. We're going down to meet them first. Minutes later, Ethan found himself crammed into the cold, narrow pod beside Shadow Eye. The cockpit was minimal: 2 joysticks, a depth gauge, and a small sonar screen flickering dimly. The hatch sealed above them with a hiss, and the pod slipped beneath the waves. The ocean swallowed the world in silence. Only the hum of the pod's engine remained. Ethan's breath sounded too loud in the confined space. Every sonar ping from the enemy subs echoed through the water like a heartbeat. 2 contacts. Shadow Eye murmured, her voice soft but precise. Both ahead, one at 400 meters, the other circling behind. We'll take the closer one. Licked his dry lips, and by take you mean board it, hijack it, and disappear before they even realize it's gone. The sonar screen pulsed. The closer submarine loomed like a dark leviathan in the depths, its shadow cutting through the deep blue. Massive, armed. Ethan's chest tightened at the sight. How do we board something like that underwater? It's not like they'll roll out a welcome mat. Shadow Eye reached into a compartment, pulling out 2 sleek grappling devices with pressurized tips. Lesson 28. Doors aren't always the way in. Sometimes you make your own. She handed him one. Follow my lead, and hold your breath when I tell you. The pod drifted closer, its engines whisper quiet. The division subs. Sonar sweeps passed overhead, but the pods stayed beneath their detection arc. At 30 meters, Shadow Eye signaled Ethan to brace. The pod's side hatch hissed open, letting in a rush of freezing seawater. Ethan's body locked. Wait, we're swimming the rest of the way? In this Shadow Eye clipped the grappling device to her belt. Her voice was calm. Stay close. Follow my bubbles. And if you panic, don't scream. It wastes air. Before Ethan could argue, she dove into the black water. The cold hit him like a wall, stealing his breath. He plunged after her, the ocean around them pitch dark. Except for the faint glow of her tracker light, every kick of his fins felt too slow, too clumsy. While she moved through the water like a shadow, smooth, efficient, silent, they reached the submarine's hull, a massive wall of steel, towering in the darkness. Shadow, I placed the grappling device against a maintenance hatch seam and pulled the trigger. A sharp hiss, then a burst. The device latched and released a micro-explosive charge. The metal hatch popped with a muted thunk, bubbles streaming out as Shadow Eye forced it open. She glanced back once, signaling Ethan to follow, then slipped inside. The interior of the sub was dim, its narrow corridors lit by red emergency lights. Only a skeleton crew was present, the bulk of the soldiers likely focused on the hovercraft. Above, Shadow Eye moved like a ghost, her footsteps silent, even on the metal floor. She gestured for Ethan to stay behind her, then disappeared around a corner. Moments later, a muffled scuffle, a soft grunt. When Shadow Eye returned, she was dragging an unconscious crewman into a storage bay. She tossed Ethan the man's sidearm. Lesson 29. No alarms, no witnesses. Every sound brings more of them. They moved deeper into the sub, passing sealed compartments and humming consoles. Each step brought them closer to the control room. Ethan's nerves screamed at him to turn back, but the thought of the division above and what they'd do if they were captured kept him moving at the final hatch. Shadow Eye crouched low, listening, two voices inside. One at a console, the other pacing. She mouthed to Ethan, 2 shots. Then, before he could prepare, she burst through the door. The fight was over in seconds. 2 suppressed shots, 2 bodies down.
Ow!
Shadow Eye moved to the console, her fingers flying over the controls. The sub's engines hummed to life, and the sonar pings shifted as the vessel altered course. Ethan stared wide-eyed. You actually know how to drive this thing." She didn't look at him. Enough to disappear. Enough to make sure the division's other sub thinks we're them, until it's too late. In the sonar screen, the second submarine adjusted its path, still searching for them near the hovercraft wrecks. They were invisible now. Ghosts beneath the sea, the tension in Ethan's chest finally eased. He slumped into a chair, his body shaking with exhaustion. So, we did it? We actually escaped. Shadow Eye finally pulled the blindfold from her head. Her eyes come sharp and unnervingly clear, met his for the first time. She adjusted their course on the screen, setting the sub on a path toward deep waters. But the division doesn't forgive. Will come again, stronger. Ethan leaned back, his breath shaky but steady. Then what do we do? Lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. We make sure that next time, they underestimate us again. As the stolen submarine slid silently into the depths, the fog above swallowed the last sounds of the battle. The division's hunters circled the empty sea, unaware that their prey had vanished beneath them, and in the cold dark, a once mocked, underestimated woman guided their stolen ship into the black, already planning for the next hunt.